What?
Time to hit the record button.
Did you hit the record button? Are you ready?
Yes?
Trish Munyard is sitting in for a door tonight.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, so calling the Clackamas River Water Regular Board Meeting to order. The date is February 8th, 2012. The time is 6:01 p.m. If you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, can you call for you roll, please? Commissioner Cardwell is late. Commissioner Holloway?
Present.
Commissioner Kemper?
Here.
Commissioner Sterling?
Here.
President Kehoe? Here, thank you, yes. And members of the audience, if you can introduce yourselves.
David Blair, right there. Bob Garbarino, Sunrise Water.
Al Jones, concerned citizen.
Bob George, District Engineer.
Adam Bjorkstead, Engineering Manager.
Carol Bragg, CFO for Clackamas River Water.
Jeff Griffin, Wilson Airgun Insurance.
Tracy Triplett, Water Quality, CFW. Suzanne Gallanza, Water Quality Manager, CFW.
Bill Schulenberg, customer.
George Payne, Oak Ledge Water District.
Gary Kerr, right there.
Will Mitchell, right there.
Thank you. Bill, I'm sorry, I noticed you left early last time, last month's meeting, January. Yep, you. Did you want?
The regular meeting.
Yeah, the regular meeting. Did you want to say something? I know that our meetings go, okay. All right. So moving on to agenda item number 2. Jeff?
Thank you. Great meeting right up front.
We
Happy
tried.
New Year. Thank you.
You too, thank you.
You really go back to Eugene this evening?
I am. Actually, I started this morning in Seattle at Bremerton. Yesterday I worked Montana, Bozeman. And Sunday I hope to find a home.
You have a Nissan Leaf then, Jeff, is that it?
I have
Utilizing the plug-in stations along that?
Yeah, I have a Honda that's running way too many miles. Tomorrow I'm going to be over in Bend at the Special District Conference.
Along with the rest of us.
Along with many of you. So in December, Commissioner Pat had asked a question about the coverage. And if a claim came in 2011, but was either reported or came to fruition in 2012, would the new coverage cover that with the deductible? And I mentioned that at that juncture I would get a hard answer so that there was no chance of a misunderstanding. I did communicate and work with special districts. They sent back their interpretation of the policy, and the way that it reads is that the defense coverage that was in question, what they pay is what incurs during the policy period. So their response to that question is no, that on those fringe coverages, the ethics, the injunctive relief, and here's the verbiage that they cited in their interpretation of it, which is with the new policy term, that what they pay is only specific to that policy term.
Right, so, I've got my question to you here somewhere, but this is relative to injunctive relief and ethics.
Ethics and that whole fringe
But
section.
But my question is relative to and those coverages just simply don't exist, so it's.
Yeah, it's moot.
It's moot.
Yeah.
But relative to the liability questions, if that was really my question.
The general liability is on an occurrence form. So,
Occurrence form,
yeah.
so.
Would be subject to the deductible, the $50,000 deductible.
No, but it's a claims-made form. So the limit is per occurrence, I think I did the aggregate. But I believe it's actually occurrence coverage.
I will check for you, but I think it is occurrence coverage, it's not claims made.
So, on that basis, then, and I'm thinking of the PGE contract in particular, now they require under that contract that unless it's an occurrence policy, we would have to maintain 3 years, you'll understand
and
this,
this,
tail coverage.
Yeah, this is, I believe it's all occurrence except for 2 parts of it, which are on the deck sheet that I think we had sent up earlier. Those parts, the employment, the employee-related, let me find it for you if I can. Give me just a second.
So if it's occurrence coverage, then depending upon when the occurrence happened, be it in last policy year or current policy year, if a claim is being made this year, for example, in connection with an occurrence that happened last year, if it's occurrence coverage, then it would fit under last year's policy. If it's claims made coverage, it would go under this year's policy. That's why that distinction is so important.
It is, and of course, with the claims made, it needs to not only occur, but be reported during that time frame.
Right. Or occur in a preceding period and that has been covered by the same insurance program.
Continues.
And reported in the current year. Right?
Yes.
So
and
that was my question, because.
in reference to the PGE contract, their requirement on the occurrence was good.
So if we have occurrence coverage, then if an event happened in a prior year's policy, going back to the beginning of the time we've been insured with SDAO, even if a claim is made in the current policy year, the governing policy terms would be the prior year's
It's
term.
important that we not blend all of the general liability together into one jacket. And I want to be very clear with the ethics, with the injunctive relief, with those issues.
But those are gone, and
Yes.
if nothing was presented last year, then that's not an issue, that's moot.
Yeah, and a typical issue might be an auto liability claim. We have an auto accident that occurred in October, it's reported
Right.
in February.
They sue us in February.
We sue us in February, we have no issues. That falls under the occurrence form.
Okay, so if an occurrence, any kind of liability occurrence happened in a prior year, and the claim is brought now, then the occurrence date policy would govern the coverage. That's
Subject to the line, subject to the type of coverage. And I want to be very careful that.
right. Other than coverages that simply aren't afforded at all this year, and there are 2 of those.
And there are a couple of lines that are claims made. The employee benefit section, in almost all policies is, and that's where,
ERISA?
where we fail to add on an employee onto the health coverage, that's almost always claims made. There's a couple of lines that are claims made, and I'll articulate those in an email up so you've got those. And now that I better understand what you're asking, the original
That's
question.
the question, because that's a biggie, considering that we have a $50,000 deductible this year. And certainly if an occurrence happened this year and a claim was made, obviously this year's policy applies.
Well, and the claims made is continuous, so that's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern, and the way I interpreted your question, I may have been wrong in December, was specific to the ethics and the.
Oh, no, that was very clear. No, that was,
Yeah, well,
I have no,
apologize.
I have no
didn't
question
see-
about that.
Yeah,
No, I'm
that
concerned
is-
about the larger issue. That's peanuts.
This will be easy to
Relatively
address
speaking.
back, and I'll dress it up in an email so you've got it.
Yeah, because so you understand, And if there are specific areas that are claims made, like, what, employee.
Employee benefit
Benefits,
liability,
yeah,
and that's
and risk
traditional in
assessment.
general liability jackets, it's very similar across the board. That one is a claims made. And I'll also give you a little definition of what those coverages would be.
And there's no deductible on auto non-owned, just so I recall.
I don't think so, it's just for general liability.
Okay.
So I'll fire that back.
Okay, so now you understand the question?
Thank you so much. And I'll get that back up in the email. Because of the conference, because
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
an attorney.
That's okay.
I'm not an attorney, not a.
It's not a burning issue, I don't need to know today. I just
yeah,
want to be sure you understand the question.
Thanks, and I'll get it directly from them, so there's no question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Jeff. In regards to the claim and occurrence, what is the definition for like an ongoing occurrence? Like some sort of liability in regards to, with employees? You know, if an employee were to make some sort of claim and states that it's an ongoing occurrence, if you can possibly.
Absolutely. Well, let me give you two definitions as kind of a foundation to build from, and then we'll articulate a claim that could go over many years. Insurance is usually sold on one of two formats, as was discussed earlier. An occurrence where you actually buy a block of time, and future claims come back to that policy, to that block of time. So what you've bought is if you will, a calendar. So when you buy the policy on an occurrence policy, and a claim is reported later, or whenever the claim occurs, it will actually go back to that policy when the policy ends. Claims made became vogue, or an evolution of insurance coverage, mostly with malpractice insurance. Initially with physicians, later with architects, engineers, and I think most of the legal profession is now on a claims made form. Claims made requires that the coverage be in place at the time the claim occurred, like occurrence form, but it's also in place when it's reported subsequently at a later date. So not only when it occurs, but when it's reported. And initially it was sold, I think, to reduce some cost, but it also has some more severe limitations. You're not buying a set period of time. And if you leave a claims-made policy, you need to buy a tail. What in our industry uses crazy names. We need to buy a tail saying that, and we buy that from the existing carrier, even if it's reported later on, a year or two, and usually they give us a block of time, we'll cover those. Or what's called a nose, again, we're using the same terms, but the nose would be the new carrier saying, yes, I'll pick up those claims retroactive. So claims made is, in my opinion, and I think it's true with most commissioners, many states will require you to actually stamp a policy that says, this is claims made, is a lesser coverage. So in this case, let's talk about an issue that may involve an employee. In employment law is something that we talked about here a number of times. Let's hypothetically say wrongful termination or harassment. Wrongful termination would be a known event. Let's say an employee comes forward and says, I've been harassed. And the harassment started back in 2005 and has been pervasive, ongoing, right up through today. Would that trigger multiple policies? Possibly so, especially if there were different carriers. And then those carriers would probably work together and determine whose liability or what percentage each carrier would contribute. What the courts would try to do, and what undoubtedly the attorneys would try to do, is determine exactly when the events occur. Is there multiple events? Is there one ongoing event? And again, my biggest concern moving from last year to this year is we have a number of unique fringe coverages, and now we have that liability deductible that's universal across all the general liability. We had some really fun additions that are not normal to our industry. The injunctive relief piece, the ethics violations, barely labor, those types of things. That was a real nice addition. Today, if a claim was brought and it was during this policy period, we would have that deductible, and then we have the employment law practice piece in, and I don't remember what the limit is. It's in the record someplace. It might be $1 million.
And,
Does our umbrella cover that?
Pardon? Yeah,
Our
and our
policy.
umbrella does up to part of it, but not
Yeah, I
all of it.
got-
It's not a full 10 on that, I think.
So I got the policy here.
Good. You'll probably find it faster than I will. And you know what, you're headed over to the conference, you know? You know, all the claims people, Jeff Sinclair, all of their legals are there on downs. We'll just grab them, have a cup of coffee, and we'll vet out any additional questions or concerns. And let's run up some scenarios. Now, keep in mind, I don't want to put them in an awkward position. But keep in mind, every time a claim comes, it's based on the prayer, the actual statement of what is being sued. So it's hard to say exactly, yes, this is always covered, or no, it's not. It's dependent on the legal verbiage the attorney files. But let's run up 2 or 3 scenarios with Jeff and Rhonda. Would you not like that idea?
Just as with attorneys, when they all get back here, they're going to have different scenarios and different answers.
They all-
And I think that you're hanging yourself, personally, Jeff, out there too far. If this is that important, you make a substantial amount of money off of the CRW ratepayers in your commission check, as well as SDAO. They need to come here. We need to get the tape turned on so it's all available to the ratepayers. I appreciate your good thoughts and your attempt to take and keep things flowing, but under these circumstances and these years of past history in regards to it, I would really recommend that you don't do that.
If you-
Get it here so that it's in the public eye and the ratepayers know.
We'll request they come out.
There we go. That's what we pay our premium
That's a good
for.
idea. And in advance of that, we can put together some scenarios so that they'll have something really concrete to address.
There you go. You can come with a portfolio of scenarios. So everybody's on the same page at any particular time.
We might actually have a real life scenario by then.
Keep me posted.
If we're lucky.
Good deal.
And if you have other questions or thoughts, email them down, let me know, and we'll chat.
I'd still be interested in speaking with them at SDAO.
I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming back.
Thank
I'll
you.
bring my copy of the policy.
Thanks.
Hey. You ready?
We're in kind of 3, and as the board has requested, we have put under Exhibit 4 a series of miscellaneous items for the board's purview as informational items only. The government relations report is under Exhibit 5, and the actual general manager's report starts on page 2, the second page in. So the first item that we have is that the Group of 8 meeting regarding the RS-190 agreement. We had another meeting. We had a read-through of the draft document. The group decided that, based upon the feedback that it got from the board members, that we have one additional read-through.
And when was that meeting?
Huh?
When was that meeting?
The meeting was last week. And that we have one additional read-through in February 2nd, to be exact, as it indicates, I think, the third line from the bottom there.
Not February 2nd.
Today is the...
Today's the 8th.
Has to be.
What was the second one?
Oh, no, you meant the 2nd. I thought you meant the next reading
Oh, no,
was
no, no,
the
no.
2nd.
It's,
Was the
I
2nd.
think Commissioner Holloway had asked when the meeting was.
Yeah,
and so
no, I thought,
it's
never,
the
sorry.
third line from the bottom, and it was held on the 2nd. And then there will be another follow-up meeting to try to finalize that document before we present it to the respective boards. Within CRW, we've had the budget kickoff meeting with staff. And now each department is meeting with our fax department one-on-one to begin to look at next year's requirements. And I think that probably sometime in March, I believe, is when we will roll that up and kind of have a rough feel for what our requirements will be for next year.
We'd like to take you back to item F, if I may. The way I interpret this, you can tell me whether my interpretation is correct or not. It looks as if you are going to bring the document to each of the respective boards. My first question is, will that be an executive session or will that be a public session?
The boards haven't determined that yet. They haven't said what the format of that meeting will be and how they will do it. There's been two points of view. One is to meet with the boards, each board individually. I mean, Sunrise meet, CRW meet. The other scenario was because we were chartered essentially by both boards and each entity handed out money, that we meet one more time with both boards combined. And that would be, I suspect, because it was last time, an executive session meeting as well. And then each board would go off and do its own due diligence.
So the group of 8, as I understand it, is either an executive session or a public meeting coming back to either individually or joint meeting of the boards with a recommendation with this draft document.
The draft document will reflect the sense of the board members in terms of issues like governance and also other content-related issues within the document.
So, but that group is in consensus about those?
Yes, they would be, yes.
Since those are coming back to the boards as a recommendation in essence, I think that those meetings then, under the public meetings law, would have been required to be publicly noticed meetings.
At which point? When they come back for executive session?
Well, when, you know, as of the Sunrise meeting, what was it, Barbara, a week ago, roughly? At that point, Wade Hawthorne, well, there are two issues. He made a report to the Clackamas River Water Providers meeting, which set out a lot of the proposed terms of that agreement. That was in their minutes. When I inquired about it at the Sunrise meeting, I was told that Mr. Phillips and Mr. Balfour and the two general managers were working on the agreement, that none of the board members of the group of 8 had sight of the agreement or any draft of the agreement at that point.
Well, that's not true. I
Okay,
can
well,
attest to that.
I'm not gonna call Mr. Hawthorne a liar.
Well,
I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't respond to it.
Yeah, there's one thing, I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know what you're saying is actually what's happened and
Well,
what
Barbara
you
was
stated.
there.
I was there.
But I've seen the draft agreement and we've been working on it. Personally, I don't think there's anything in there that can't be released to the public for discussion. And that's still being discussed in that meeting as to what type of forum we want to have when both boards take a look at the agreement together.
And Mr. Blake, who is not here tonight, also confirmed that stated very clearly that the Sunrise Board participants had never seen any documents, so obviously you are ahead of them.
No, because two of their board members attend those meetings.
I know that, but they
So-
specifically said they had not seen it, and you say you had, so,
And Mr. Blake stated that specifically.
yeah.
Well,
Mr. Blake and Ernie both stated that this was still, there's still a confidentiality agreement in regard to that.
No,
The
but they-
full boards had not seen the documents.
Though they specifically stated that they had not seen it, or Rhonda.
So maybe we can clear it up if you can tell us what the date of the Sunrise meeting was.
I'll have to,
Because
well,
if
it'll
it
be in
was-
Commissioner, first
Because it
report, I'm
very
sure.
well, it very well could have been before the 2nd of
But-
February.
Commissioner Kehoe just said that she had seen it numerous times.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, she hasn't, she's only been to 2 meetings.
We've seen the draft agreement. We've seen what you and Clark have worked on. So this is kind of futile to discuss what someone else has said when they're not here. So I think we should move on at this point.
Okay,
Did
well,
that answer
here's-
your question in regards to how it's going to be presented?
I have a couple more questions. My interpretation of this wording is that the boards are going to be asked to approve the agreement before it goes to the court. And I remember very clearly, the initial agreement was that it would go to the court first. So has there been a change in that process?
The boards have indicated that they would want to approve the draft agreement before it goes to the court.
Which boards? That it has not, executive session, no decision could be made. This board has not
I'm
done
telling
that.
you about, you asked me what happened in the meeting, I'm telling you what happened in the meeting, I'm not talking about this board.
But they can't make a decision,
Lee. I have a question for you, Dean. In regards to that
What's the
agreement,
point?
don't you need to be, don't you need to have something in place in order for a court to take a look at?
Yes.
Which means you need to have some sort of official agreement or some sort of board action. So you have some sort of standing as to why you are before a court for evaluation and for approval?
Yes, and I don't know where you got the understanding, Commissioner Holloway, that the agreement would not be approved by the board prior to going through the validation process.
from my participation in a lot of early meetings.
Well, I think that was a misunderstanding because we've never said that the agreement would not be approved by the boards prior to going to the court for the validation process. And in fact, both of our opinions have been that you would have to have an approved agreement, something to take to the court. The court is not going to review a draft agreement.
Exactly.
Well, does that mean it would be implemented, so it would be in place and rolling and left for the court to potentially stop or approve?
No, and that's where I think the confusion may have come in,
Then maybe you can
because
clarify that.
you are exactly correct that the discussions and the understanding is that the agreements would be approved by the boards through a full public airing of the process, and as this indicates, the discussions now, it looks like there's going to be a minimum of 2 public process by the boards before each board or both boards collectively would approve the agreement, and that process hasn't been worked out. After that, the validation process would happen where the agreement would be presented to the court. The agreement would not be implemented until, and the agreement specifically, the draft agreement does contain this language, that the agreement would not be implemented until the court rules on the validation of that agreement. And then, once the court rules, obviously if the court says that the agreement is not valid or we don't achieve the boundary protection that's the goal of the agreement goes away, gives the right of either party to terminate it without any penalty.
And where in that process do our sister and brother water districts get rolled into the process? Does that wait until it goes to the court? Do we only solicit their input ahead of time?
That's still under discussion by the boards, and I think that's a process that is going to be brought back to both of the boards.
If
to
you
discuss.
have any input in regards to that process, please send myself or Barbara an email, and we can present it during the meeting and have it up for discussion.
Okay, Thank you. That answers my question.
We met with the PGE representative, Mr. Kane, regarding the generator project. We had gotten some feedback as a result of talking with our contractor, and that there's some issues that may need to be worked out. We were somewhat misinformed by it in the sense that there's some issues, I think, really by both parties, and I think more misunderstanding about where they were within the process. But Mr. Kane did help facilitate the meetings with PGE, and we got the answers that we needed, and we're moving forward. He was extremely helpful.
And what kind of issues?
Well, it had to do primarily with communications in terms of getting some approvals from PGE.
Was there any feedback from them in regards to some of the contract language we were wanting to possibly amend? Did we get any
Feedback from PGE?
Exactly.
Yeah, Adam will
go over that later.
address that more specifically when he gets there.
Can I clarify just what you said, Lee, real quick? The issues that Lee's talking about are having to do with that other project that this contractor happened to be involved in with PGE. It's not pertaining to our project specifically, but we heard some things come up from the contractor, concerns about working with PGE, and we discussed those with Mr. Kane.
Okay. And touching on what Kemi was just addressing, while we have Jeff before he flies off to far points.
You might
Sun
want to
Valley.
bring that section forward, because that was an open issue from the last meeting.
Yeah, and it's on our agenda tonight. And so staff, Jeff, is urging the board to approve the PGE contract, and I certainly have had the insurance question about it. So if you're willing to lay your malpractice on the line and say we have occurrence coverage, I'll believe you.
The occurrence piece, I think is good. I spoke with Dean earlier.
This is really important. This is what significantly held it up last meeting.
That piece, we're good with on the occurrence piece. So,
Okay,
and that was ran up with special district, so we're good there.
okay, and we have that in writing.
I will send you a note to that.
Good. I'll feel
So,
better.
so basically, the ratepayers should be satisfied and rest comfortably that any action that PGE puts forth that would cause damage to ratepayer property in conjunction with their contractual obligation of operating the generator is going to be covered under SDAO's policy.
Grafton, I can't say that. What I can say is that the occurrence question, do we have claims made form we need to keep enforced for 3 years? That's not the case. The question that Pat asked me about occurrence, that was resolved, but I can't answer potential claims or allegations that haven't been brought.
But you understand my position that the ratepayers want to be rest assured. It's a wonderful idea. It's worked twice here in our county before. It's spectacular. But they still need to be able to understand that when working with PGE, if something does occur, do they have to dig into their pockets for it?
Commissioner Sterling, I think your questions are well taken, and I think we will address those issues when we get to that agreement. So if we want to talk about it now, that's fine with me, but all of those issues we can talk about those when we actually get to that.
I guess I would recommend
Well,
while
here's the thing,
Mr.
well,
Jeff is
here's
here.
the problem. Mike needs to be here to vote on it if it's being presented for an action item. So Mike does need to hear the discussion.
Well, we have a
So-
quorum, Tammy. You know, people miss meetings.
I do remember that Mr. Cardwell did have a question about it as a result of the issue that you had raised, Commissioner Hall.
Okay, well.
So, but I believe the insurance question has been
The
answered.
occurrence
So
issue.
I think we can keep the agenda item as is, and that part has been resolved.
And we won't have to give Jeff a sleeping bag.
I'm good, thank you.
And I don't know who's in charge, but we've got a flood going on over there with the water cooler.
Lee.
Okay. Staff also met with Wes and Sunrise Water Authority. It was really kind of a get to know you meeting where the staffs of all three agencies met. Wes presented us with an overview of some of their plans in terms of what they're intending in the area. They have expressed some concerns that because in Clackamas County, the utility rates are separate, that we really haven't had much of a discussion about combined rates. And they are, because of their expansion, as you know, you probably read in the paper about them buying
The blue herring.
Blue Herring and so forth. They did share with us their projected rates over the next 10 years. And they're projecting that their rates will double in the next 5 years, and they will quadruple within the next 10 years. And pretty significantly. And so they were trying to get from us kind of what our plans were, and also share with us some of the issues that they're having to deal with in terms of the Sunrise Corridor, and the requirement that anytime you build a transportation corridor like that, the water has to be held within the confines of that project. And that's an issue that hasn't been vetted yet with the state, and so they're beginning those discussions. And one of the things that we committed to do is, as a group, at least twice a year, begin to get back together again and do this information sharing and kind of finding out, the left hand finding out what the right hand is doing. As you know, on the Roberts property, there is a easement on our site, and it's yet to be determined how Wes intends to utilize that easement.
Are you saying that, are you talking about a catchment of runoff from the construction, or are you talking about embedding the water utility lines as the construction proceeds?
Well, we have a line down there now.
Right.
And they also have a site upriver from there, as I understand it, where there's some natural runoff that is going on. But as the Sunrise Corridor is developed, that's going to generate even more water. And the issue is, how are they going to, first of all, manage the water, and to what degree will they treat it? You know?
So you're talking about stormwater runoff?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And, you know, the concern for us, quite frankly, is does that occur, first of all, how is the water going to be treated? And the site that they have now is above our intake,
Right.
versus the easement that they have is below our intake. So I think it's in our best interest to continue those discussions.
Lee, did they say if they were going to continue to utilize that, the discharge with growth, or were they looking at using more of that Blue Heron site? Did they say if they were going to?
With the Blue Herring site, one of the reasons that they purchased it is that it has a discharge permit.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are also some water rights there. Although the water rights were not sold with, or not a part of the purchase. And then there's also rights that PGE has to the shoreline that are not a part of the discussion either. So, so those are all open issues.
Oh, Commissioner Sterling.
Speaking of discharge, Has anyone bothered to follow up with the city of Estacada in regard to their continual violation of a discharge into the Clackamas River from their wastewater treatment plant?
No, not at CRW.
I think that's a CRW issue. That's something you might want to,
Have they been charged for violations?
Yes.
They have?
investigate.
I think you took the tour, didn't you?
Yeah.
Didn't you,
Yeah.
weren't you on the
Yeah.
bus, Commissioner? Yeah.
Me too.
That's something you might want to pursue individually. But I don't think it warrants to be placed as an agenda item or for CRW
So
to
it
take some sort of
it
action.
really doesn't make any difference what's discharged into the river above the west proposed discharge.
Well, no, I think that there's certain state agencies that take care of that, like DEQ.
We can have our water quality people follow up. And
Well, it just seems logical. I mean, one doesn't have to have a college education to determine that if something is being discharged above your intake, whether it's through West or the city of Estacada, unfortunately, because of their small tax budget and small revenue, someone should go and afford them some sort of, hello, we're here, is there something we can do to help you? Because it's coming down to our intake.
Well, we do test the water at our intake. And,
We know that, Mr. Moore.
well,
But are we going to wait until their effluent is in our intake? That's okay, that's all right.
Yeah, can we
The
continue?
chairwoman made her
Can we-
point
Can
clear.
we just continue with the agenda item?
Yeah,
I mean, there's a
I'm-
process and people want to add something on. But I'd like to just continue on with
Okay,
this
but
agenda.
in sort of a response to what Grafton's asking, if they are in violation of what they're allowed to discharge, then they get a daily fine for those discharges, Grafton.
We know that, they've been fined.
And are they
Yeah.
paying thousands of dollars?
I think it was $83,000?
Virtually, we're drinking it.
Can we continue on because this is
I did attend
legal
the,
discussion.
I did attend the All Cities Luncheon. And what I tried to do was, that was put on by the Chamber of Commerce. And the mayors were there presenting both their accomplishments and goals for the coming year. And as you can see in the 5 bullets there, I tried to summarize their 3-minute statements for each. And I won't go into those. They kind of speak for themselves unless there's questions. The other item that I have is the PGE generator project. That is, we've had some discussion about it. We'll have some more discussion later in the meeting, so I won't go into that. As you saw in the board packet, there was an event at the South Fork Water Board where their plant was down for 7 days. They were not quite sure what caused the damage. They do know that it was pretty extensive, and as a result, they had to shut their plant down completely. And what's interesting here is that the South Fork plant is probably the most robust of all the plants. But due to the efforts of staff, we were able to reroute the water, that we provided water to Sunrise Water Authority, and NCCWC was able to provide water to South Fork, and Lake Oswego was able to provide water to West Lynn. I did put a summary sheet of the events along with a diagram of how the water was moved in the packet if you had questions about that. One of the things that came out of that when we sat down afterwards and had our debrief with the general managers and technical staff is that we basically said that this was a classic example of and why we need to have the joint operating plan operational. And the group has decided to move forward on the joint operating plan. And we're in the process of setting up the meetings to have those discussions. Also, thinking that it was advisable to have Lake Oswego join in those discussions as well. So I thought it was a very successful event. There was also a presentation done at the regional water providers meeting by Dan Bradley, and the rest of the general managers were there to offer our support on that. And I might add that we received quite a bit of kudos from the other participants at the regional meeting and how well we were able to pull this off without incident. So,
Mr. Moore, the joint operation plan was signed July 12, 2001. The intergovernmental cooperative agreement for the construction of Line B was done and signed. But I have got to commend you, sir, for an excellent graphic presentation in how CRW ratepayers' water went through Line B to South Fork. Now, could you explain to the CRW ratepayers why we're paying nearly $500,000 a year to South Fork for their very own water?
first of all, I have to disagree with your premise.
Which premise is that?
Well,
That
first of all,
the joint operation plan
If
is
you let me
not
say-
in
If you
effect?
let me return the conversation, I'll answer your question. First of all, CRW water did not go through line B. You can look at the diagram. Our water went to Sunrise Water Authority. Okay. Secondly,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just find it humorous when it's just a personal feeling, when someone takes such a strong position on something and it's wrong.
secondly, the rate that we're paying South Fork is a rate that was mutually agreed to in the judge's chamber with our water expert and their water expert, and was voted on and approved by this board. So,
Not
I guess,
me.
well, you weren't on the board at the time, so I
Just
guess
as
you
long
didn't
as
have
the
an
public
opportunity to vote.
understands that.
Well, but you keep saying that somehow we're being used or exploited, and I guess I have to take issue with that question, or with that statement. This was arrived at as part of a court order. We were being sued by South Fork, who had refused to negotiate. And the outcome of that was that the court made South Fork negotiate, and the price that we arrived at was mutually arrived at by our experts in the judge's chamber. And that's about what we would pay if we were pumping the water there, because the one thing that I think people continue to think of is that, one, our water is free, and it's not. It runs at about 40 cents, about 51 cents at the clear well approximately. But with that, you don't include the water, the cost of transportation or moving the water through pipe. When you add that in, you'd have to add in another 40-some cents.
Commissioner Sterling, where are you getting your information from on the Pipeline B project? I'm just curious. Because
Isn't this diagram yours, Mr. Moore?
Because there seems to be,
That was a diagram that was put together as a result of the meeting that we had with the four water providers. But
Yeah.
that does not show CRW water going through Pipeline B.
so I guess my question is, where are you getting your
Right
information
here.
from?
Right here.
I
Line
know,
B.
but you also,
Line B, right straight across. Here's CRW, line B, across the river to South
yeah, and
Fork.
I see the diagram, I've seen
Right.
it, but it doesn't state anything about what happened and where that water went through. And you were there at the presentation, and that's not even what Dan Bradley said. So
Well, there, once again, we have different interpretations as to what Dan Bradley said.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you what happened, because that's part of my job, is to figure out who's selling water to whom. We sold water to Sunrise. We
I
did not
observed
sell
that
water to
presentation.
But
NCWC.
this diagram, Mr. Moore, that someone constructed clearly shows the path from CRW to South Fork and our Service 2 and Service 3 through Line B and Wheeling.
I guess I take issue with how you're reading the graph.
Okay, well, that's fine.
I mean, you know, I just do.
Well, that's fine.
Commissioner Holloway?
The issue really, to me, is not that whether CRW water went through pipeline B or not. The issue is that the joint,
Operation plan.
the joint operations plan and all that has been in place for many, many years. And the discussions among the general managers, you've been involved in for at least 2 years, as I recall. And so I guess my question to you is, are you representing to us that as a result of this kind of beneficial result and demonstration of the value of alignment B, et cetera, that the general managers of South Fork Water Board and the commission are now willing to let CRW assume its place in the queue and have access to our ability to send that water over to the south? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the parties to the joint operating plan, which are also the parties who paid for the construction of Pipeline B, are in the process now, and they see the value of the coordination of moving water throughout the basin. None of us were here when that agreement was put together, and as you know,
That's not quite true.
Mr.
Commissioner
I
Cardinal
mean,
is here.
I don't know, I mean, but I don't think so. This is like 2001.
He's been here a long time.
Yeah. And essentially, when CRW signed on to that agreement from the review that I've done, it was in order to get a seat at the table for the purpose of discussing the regional movement of water throughout the Clackamas River.
I guess I would push back on that. I've read all those minutes,
That's all
and
right.
that isn't my interpretation.
Well, I think we're at a point now where there's some possible future discussions,
Yeah.
if that's
That's
correct.
great.
And I think that this situation actually made a lot of the water providers in the region recognize the fact that we need to have an intertie system, and we need to work together. And I'm not taking any blame for that screen being misplaced, being knocked out. I know nothing about it. So it's been a catalyst. And like Lee said, there were a lot of accolades at that Regional Water Provider Consortium meeting. And I thought it was great because just the feel of that meeting and just the different mentality of joining together was very apparent. And that's like the first time it's kind of happened through the years. So
Well, one
it's
of the
definitely a
things
step in the
that-
right direction.
Well, I think one of the things too, and the legal agreement that we reached with South Fork, one of the things that it conditions future rates on is the implementation of the joint operating plan. I don't know what you're talking about, Commissioner Holloway. I was there in the meeting. It
I've read the
envisioned-
agreement.
Well, but you weren't in the meeting, okay? And what the judge had said and what we agreed to was that we don't know what the true cost of water is until you incorporate the spirit of the joint operating plan, and i.e. wheeling water throughout the region, and that is not occurring now. And most people know that under human behavior, sometimes it takes a crisis for people to understand the need for something, and that's what happened in this particular event.
But last winter, when the river turned to sludge, Let's see, I'm working from memory now. I think the commission plant couldn't process water because of the sludge, and South Fork Water Board sent water down through Pipeline B to the commission. So I agree, absolutely. It's wonderful if finally the organizations are gonna work together to do that. I've been promoting that and trying to help that happen since 2007. But it's not, this water exchange is not a new thing. It has gone on fairly regularly over time. When South Fork's Clearwell was closed when they were doing their renovation, the commission sent water through Pipeline B to South Fork, which is exactly what happened apparently this time. And we always sell water to Sunrise. So all I'm saying is nothing new happened now that has not happened multiple times in fairly recent history. What appears to have changed is the attitude of our other two partners, which I think is wonderful.
And we can contribute that a lot to our current general manager. Lee has done a wonderful job forming relationships with those general managers, fostering an environment of trust. And he's also worked with them to let them know that we are open for discussion and we're open for business. So I think that, you know, if there's any reason why that's happening, the common denominator is Lee.
Entitled to your opinion.
Well, I don't think it was you.
Certainly not.
We did receive the final order from the Water Resources Department approving CRW's water management and conservation plan. The Regional Water Providers Consortium February board meeting, we talked about that already. And we still have the open issue of the BCT settlement agreement that was put in abeyance until Commissioner Holloway provided information.
And I have that. I just want to take you back 1 minute to the final order from WRD. You said that their approval was the result of your visit where you discussed the plans for the 190 agreement. I looked through the water conservation plan, which, by the way, still has some significant errors.
But it's approved.
Yeah, well, if you had bothered to show it to the board, I certainly would have caught them immediately.
You sent a disc where you went through every page of that agreement.
2 years ago, Lee.
And you edited it. Based upon that, staff looked at your edits. We sat down. We had at least 6 meetings with staff going through that. It was circulated to all the other water providers in the region, and then it was submitted to the state. So to say that you've never seen the agreement, I think is a little of a mistake.
I would refer you specifically to the statement that says we have an expired agreement with South Fork Water Board. First of all, the comments that I made were way back, at least 2 years ago. Number
What's
two,
your point, Pat?
my point is.
I'm sitting here listening to you
Okay, well,
call me a
here's-
liar. I
okay,
don't
no,
like it.
I am not. That's your interpretation, Lee. What I'm saying
What are you
is
shaking
this.
your head for, Mr. Blair? I mean, to sit here through every meeting and watch you disrespect staff.
Mr. Moore, were you ever an undercover
Lee-
policeman in Alaska?
Lee and-
Will you shut up,
Lee and
please?
Mr.
I'm talking to
Blair.
the board.
No, you were
Lee-
disappointed in me and started talking to me.
Lee and
Are we
Mr.
talking or
Blair,
not?
I'd like to just keep to the agenda, and I understand your concerns. But if we need to move on, then I say we just.
Well, here's what I'm saying, Kathy.
Well,
The conservation report makes absolutely no reference whatsoever to the 190, number one. Number two,
I
the
didn't say it
190,
did.
the 190 is not in place. It's still an objective out there. And so how can the existence of something or the discussion about something that doesn't exist contribute to the approval of a plan that doesn't include it? That's my question.
The answer to your question is when I sat down with the people in Salem and explained to them what we're trying to do in the Clackamas River Basin, none of which they had any knowledge of. They said, based upon that, we're willing to withhold our objections and allow this plan to go through.
So do you have an issue with the state not taking an objection with our conservation plan?
No,
So-
Cammie, my question, as I just stated, was, this made a reference to the 190, which doesn't exist. It is not mentioned or
Well,
reflected in any way in the conservation
the
plan.
190 does exist, it just hasn't been approved yet.
It doesn't exist.
No, it does exist because I've attended the meeting, so I know it exists.
Cammie, it doesn't exist. I don't know
No,
what
Pat.
planet you're living on.
Pat, it does exist, it just hasn't been approved
It does
yet.
not exist. It's a draft on a piece of paper somewhere.
But
It does
was-
not
But
exist.
you know, but it was obviously sufficient for the state to say, okay, you know, the Water Resources Department has made a statement that we need to start discussing regionalization of water. This is, the 190 is the step in that direction, and we're doing it before the state implements their own program.
Have you read
the
the
state-
conservation plan, Cammie?
I have read it, Pat, and the
Show me where
state-
it says that. It doesn't.
No,
It
Pat,
doesn't have to
what I
say
want
it.
you to
That's-
Well,
do
you
is-
just said it
what I want you
does.
to do is show
No,
me
the
here
point-
where I've said that. What I said here is disapproval is the result of my visit to the Department of Water Resources, where we discussed our plans for the 190 agreement, period.
You said it was as a result of, okay.
No,
that's
it
fine.
says where we discussed.
Okay.
That's
Well,
what it says right here. Read your document.
all right, but the plan, the conservation plan does not mention that.
I didn't say the conservation plan mentioned that.
No, Cammie said that.
No, I did not say that, Pat.
Well, listen to
No,
the
you asked
recording
me
and you'll
if
find
I,
out.
if I had read it, and I said yes. I didn't say it included it. I said that the state had a program that they were trying to implement. And that they were aware of the 190 and what it is that we're trying to do.
Well,
That's what I
what-
stated.
Whatever you said is on the record. I would like to go back, when you're done, to a couple of earlier exhibits.
Well, we're not going to. We're going to move on with our meeting. You had your chance. So,
Cammie, hello, this is the manager's report. We're
yes,
entitled to
and
discuss it.
I'm running the meeting, and you had a chance to discuss earlier items. So Lee, can we please proceed?
The only other item that I have is that I really need to bring to the board's attention, and it's really a continuation of what I feel is going on in this meeting. The employees in this agency are extremely upset that they were involved in a situation where personal information was sent over CRW's email to them, involving the board and the commission, which was highly inappropriate. And the concern here is that they're believing that they're being held to a different standard as employees, and not really seeing the kind of conduct exhibited by the board that is expected of them as employees. If they were to send information about a coworker over CRW's email, personal and confidential information, they would be subject to discipline up to and including discharge. And to have received the information that they got, it has caused them to be very concerned about information that is also not under the custody of CRW, that resides with some commissioners, and wondering if this is something that they can expect to happen to their own personal and confidential data. And so I think that what we're having to do now is creating more liability for the organization because of the inappropriateness of what happened. And we're also looking at how we can make sure that employees' personal and private information is protected. And so I bring that information to the board as an informational item and say that this is something that the staff is extremely upset about and wonder how, if this board has indicated that there is not supposed to be direct communication between commissioners and they, that this information is being distributed over our email system by commissioners, when it really is none of their business, is not something that they want to participate in, and it made them extremely uncomfortable having seen it. So I bring that to the board, and that's the end of my report.
My question, Mr. Moore, is what personal staff information was released?
Well, Commissioner Holloway, we've had a court case on that.
I beg your pardon?
We've had a court case on that where there is computerized records that are in your possession that even the court has told you that you cannot use. And the staff is concerned that as long as it's in your possession, and looking at what you presented in the 23rd of January and what you're presenting now is yet another example of where poor judgment is being used by involving employees in this kind of information, and they resent it.
I believe it's a total and complete fabrication on your part, Mr. Moore. This is simply part of your plan to establish your personal agenda. And I speak from the experience of the last meeting when you accused me of harming one of our employees under this whistleblowing issue. You're completely fabricating it. If you have documentation, as you say you do, then you need to bring it out into the open and quit hiding things. Where is the documentation?
Mr. Sterling,
I'd like
don't
to-
ever
I'd like
point
to-
your
I'd
finger
like
at me.
to ask
Don't
counsel-
ever point your finger at me.
Lee? Thank you.
You either, Mr. Blair.
You better get accustomed to it, to be truthful with you.
Okay.
This is a complete fabrication.
And I did
Where
not-
is the information?
And I did not
Mr.
accuse you at the last board meeting.
Well, it's on the
You did, you put
record.
it in writing.
You put it in record.
About
on-
both of
on
us.
record.
Okay.
And you verbalized it too.
I think that we need to involve council in this discussion.
You gotta be kidding me.
Instead of throwing and lobbying verbal bombs against each other. So.
Excuse
I
me, it was
have-
counselors'
I have-
prostitution,
I have-
solicitation,
You've
arrest.
been waiting all
That was
month to say that,
distributed,
Ms. Holloway,
Tammy.
and I think it's
She said,
inappropriate.
like, please
It's
support
completely
me.
appropriate, it's public
Yeah.
information.
Okay.
Well, why are you saying it to
And it
employees?
directly
Okay,
reflects on the
you know
moral
what?
character
Why are you saying
of
it
our
to
legal
employees?
counsel,
Why are you
and
saying
I
it to
reference
employees?
Where's the
our
documentation, Mr.
organization.
Moore?
Okay.
Huh?
You know what?
I tell you what, I know what, Commissioner Kehoe.
I'd like to
I tell you right now, I'm
continue-
going to make a motion. I move that Clackamas River Water immediately suspend the legal service contract with Dean Phillips, Phillips Law, instruct Phillips to deliver CRW files to Davis Wright Tremaine, and CRW will refer requests for legal services to Davis Wright Tremaine. The Clackamas River Board of Commissioners may consider lifting the suspension in the event the Oregon State Bar exonerates Phillips from ethics complaint of ORCP 1.2 sub C, 1.7, 1.13, 4.1, and 8.4 sub A sub B.
Second.
In addition to that, I bring to his attention ORS 9.527, grounds for disbarment or suspension or reprimand. The Supreme Court may disbar, suspend, or reprimand a member of the bar whenever, upon proceedings for that purpose, it appears to the court as you have been convicted and prosecuted of solicitation of prostitutes. Not only that, it's in a school zone.
Okay.
My motion is,
There's a motion on the table. I think it's up for discussion. And, Dean, if you'd like to speak about it, I'd like to give you that opportunity before we proceed.
Has the motion been seconded?
Yes, it was seconded.
And thank you, Madam Chair and council members, and as well as the public. That situation in 2006 obviously was a very unfortunate situation. I was in a situation where I allowed myself to be placed where it was the word of an undercover police officer against my own word, and I decided not to challenge it. I decided to allow the conviction to happen on the basis that I thought, and as it turned out, it was correct, that one act does not determine the character of an individual. And the Oregon State Bar agreed with that. I have over 30 years of exemplary service as a member of the bar. The Oregon State Bar, Mr. Grafton, has already looked at that issue. They already determined it had no reflection on my capacity to practice law. And at the time that I was hired by DWT, nobody asked if there was anything on my record in terms of any convictions whatsoever. Therefore, there was no duty on my part to disclose that to the board because it simply didn't have any relevance as to my ability to practice law. Some people may gravitate to the idea that that does determine the character, and certainly by the emails that Commissioner Holloway has sent out, by the letters to the editor that Mr. Mitchell has sent, there are some people who obviously want to jump on the conviction and say that that defines the character of an individual. I happen to think that what one person said, that an act may result in a habit, and a habit may define one's character. Obviously, this is one incident that has occurred. You will not find any other convictions of crimes on my record. This conviction is eligible for expungement once it goes off of the record. It is off of the record, and under the law, I am able to answer any question as to whether I have been arrested or convicted of a crime with a no. That's what the expungement process allows. That process is not complete, but once it is, it will completely go off of the record. So whatever the board decides, the board certainly has the prerogative to ask for the suspension of my legal services. They have the prerogative to make a decision that it has not affected my ability to practice law, as the bar did, and I will be happy to abide by the decision of the board. I have always said that I serve at the pleasure of the board, and try as I might to develop a working environment. I, like 3 other law firms and many other attorneys before me, have failed in that regard. And you know, there are obviously some members of this board who will not accept anybody's assistance and advice unless they agree with them, and instead want to denigrate the character of an individual based upon one act. And if the public goes along with that and thinks that is the same as well as this board, if they want to think that, I have no control over that. And I am willing to serve at the pleasure of the board. I still continue to serve at the pleasure of the board, and if at any time the board wants me to discontinue my services, I'm happy to abide by the decision of the board.
Thank you. Well, you know, it's out there. I'm glad that we're able to discuss it, and hopefully then put this behind us and move forward after this vote on this motion. Unfortunately, you are a contract employee. Well, not really an employee, but we do have a contract with you. So I'd like the staff of CRW to know that because of that, the confidentiality process is a little bit more lax. I'm hoping that you don't take this instance as something that this board would allow to be taken with an employee of the organization. But there is a difference with someone that CRW contracts with. This isn't my preferred method of doing it, but it's out there, and I think that this board needs to make a decision and then move on. What I'm pretty kind of offended by is that this really has nothing to do with water and what this organization does in servicing the public. And I don't understand, this is my own opinion, as to how this instance reflects on Dean's ability to provide counsel to CRW. So, Commissioner Holloway, if you'd like to.
Yeah, first of all, despite all of the various allegations that have been made by parties who shall be nameless at the moment, to my knowledge, I have no confidential employee information, nor has it ever been established that I ever put out to anyone confidential employee information. And the only parties I am aware of sitting in this room who have put out employee confidential information, or the only party,
I would caution you before you name someone who is an employee. I will caution you.
Well, go ahead and caution me.
I'm going to caution you.
Fine, it's Commissioner Lee Moore, and he has done that, as has employee Vance Boyles. And I have made that statement in statements sworn under perjury. But, to get back to the point.
Point of order, that means
okay.
you stop, okay? There is nothing that you're discussing right now has anything to do with the motion on the floor, so can we move on?
All right, well, I do
Stop.
have something to say relative to the
Well,
motion, which is that I do feel that I just certainly deserve the opportunity to respond to Mr. Moore's accusations. However, on the subject of Mr. Phillips is currently under scrutiny of the Oregon State Bar on a number of ethics issues, not just this one.
Filed by you and Mr.
No,
Sterling.
not by me.
By Mr. Sterling.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I have no problem, Mr. Moore, stating in
Okay.
open public forum that we're in right now.
Well then, okay.
And
well,
Commissioner
then I
Keno,
think-
if I may finish my statement,
well, then I
those
think-
complaints relate, as I understand them, directly to Mr. Phillips' performance as legal counsel
Well,
for
until I see something from
CRW.
the state bar, I think your motion is premature. So unless you have something besides what you produced that affects the way of counsel to provide, Dean, to provide counsel to CRW, I'd like to move on the motion.
I do want to clarify one thing from the record,
Can-
and I don't know where Commissioner Holloway got her information, but I am not under scrutiny by the bar for anything other than the complaint filed this month by Commissioner Sterling.
Well, I didn't say you were.
You did too.
I did not.
You
I
just
said
did
a
state-
number of
Okay.
issues. He just read them off, Dean.
No, you said that I'm under investigation by.
I said you were under.
Well, at this particular time, Mr. Phillips doesn't have to defend himself. The issue is in front of the board. Commissioner Kemper would like to make a statement.
That's
Commissioner
correct,
Kehoe?
if you'd let me do that.
Yes,
Mike.
Absolutely, please do so.
Okay. Be it, I can understand how a person would take a plea when it gets to a point where to defend oneself becomes extraordinarily expensive, and working against the word of an undercover cop could probably not be overcome. If Dean happened to be guilty of this, certainly it was not his finest hour. I don't care. We've had presidents, we've had senators, Oregon's had a governor guilty, definitely found guilty, absolutely found guilty of much more serious things than this, and they still have done good work in office. I personally don't see how in any way this affects Dean's ability to be an attorney for CRW.
Thank you. Mike?
Certainly, I would not condemn a person for one individual act, especially one individual act that was 6 years or so, and there's been nothing since then. Everything that I've seen from Mr. Phillips has been exemplary as far as attorney, activities he's done for us. I also continually am amazed at how low some people will stoop to try to gain control. Yeah, absolutely, how low some people will stoop. It never ceases to amaze me.
I have to agree with you, and I have to say that I don't think it brings a lot of confidence in employees, regardless about the privacy issue, that they themselves won't be the subject of some sort of retaliatory act or some sort of public humiliation or some sort of harassment. So regardless what you have to say about what you have and what you don't have, I think your actions tell a whole different story.
My actions have been none, Cammie. Those actions have all been on the part of you, Barbara, Mike, Dean Phillips, Cindy Lewis Wolfram.
Let's let,
You're the ones who
let's let
attacked.
Commissioner Kemper, she has something she'd like to add.
I'm doing a
Unsuccessfully, by the way.
Go ahead.
Okay, any further discussion, or I'm going to call the vote? Commissioner Sterling?
Mr. Phillips has established a methodology. It's fine to say it's one incident, but when you went to DWT, you had an obligation under your code of ethics to report to them. And you chose intentionally and with full cognitive thought to let it slide and hope that it didn't come up. This is very characteristic of repetitive behavior. You've been able to slide since it.
Well,
If you,
let's
I'm
just
sorry,
start.
I'm
Let's
not through yet,
just-
sir. You'll have all the time that TO wants to let you have to defend yourself,
All right.
okay? This expunge from the record thing, this doesn't take 3 or 4 years in order for it to be done. I firmly believe you haven't even begun to expunge the issue. Mr. Phillips, it's just simply a matter of you choosing pattern behavior to protect yourself. You can't divorce yourself from your ethics. You just can't. It's not one incident. You chose to multiply it by taking and not telling as you should according to your code. According to the Supreme Court as well, 9.527. I'm not asking for you to defend yourself.
Okay,
You can put it all in writing.
Dean, I'm gonna finish this discussion with what you have to say, and then I'm going to call the vote.
I don't know where you got your information, Mr. Sterling, to make the accusation that I did not disclose this to DWT.
You just stated that.
I did not state that.
Well, you'll have to play the tape back.
I don't know what you're listening to, but it
Well,
wasn't
play the
anything
tape
that I
back.
said. I fully disclosed the situation to the DWT management at the time that this occurred. Since that time, the management of DWT has changed, so if anybody contacted DWT and asked them about the incident, they may well have said, we don't know anything about it, because the management has changed. So you're accusing me here in this meeting without having the knowledge of what actually happened in the situation.
Dean, you just said you chose not to
Can we,
inform them.
can you
I
call the
did
vote?
not.
That's okay, that's okay. It's on record.
We're going to
Choose.
call the vote.
So you need to, sorry,
Commissioner
read the motion
Barlow?
again, read the motion again, please.
I'll try here. Commissioner Sterling made motion that Clackamas River Water immediately suspend the legal service contract of Mr. Dean Phillips.
Is that sufficient?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's important that, ma'am, you read the second paragraph also too.
Let's just give it to her.
And turn over all files to Davis Wright Tremaine. And I'm sorry I didn't get all of your ORB.
If you could actually, Mr. Sterling, provide her with the motion. We know what the motion is. If you can please call the vote.
I want her to take and read the motion, I have it. I want her to read paragraph 2 so that it's clear.
No, she does not have to read the paragraph. You already stated it. If you could call the vote, please.
Commissioner Cardwell,
No.
Commissioner Holloway,
Yes.
Commissioner Kemper,
No.
Commissioner Sterling,
Yes.
Commissioner Kehoe.
No.
The vote is 3 no and 2 yes. It doesn't pass.
We, BCT, because we finally received this information, I know that we'll wait on it, but I am wondering where they are at in the process. Have you reached out to them? Have they met?
No, I took it upon myself to wait until Commissioner Holloway, till this meeting, before I made contact. I didn't want to
Okay.
have to.
So we'll just
Go back
add it on
and-
to a different agenda. Okay, so moving on. Do
And
you have any other items on your?
All of the
report?
documents I referenced are CRW documents. If you can't locate them, let me know.
Well, that's what you said last time, Commissioner
No,
Holloway.
I specifically identified them. So if you can't find them, let me know.
Thank you, Carol.
Good evening, Carol Bright, CFO. The standard financial reports for this evening are accounts receivable aging as of January 31st. December is a billing month, so January tends to be a collection month. We do bill our wholesale, we do bill Sunrise Water Authority, the wholesale customer on a monthly basis, so in that 0 to 30 column is essentially the dollars that we bill to Sunrise Water Authority. The ending balance is of nearly $50,000 less than where we were at the end of November. That's primarily due to the fact that October was our largest billing cycle of this year. The December billing cycle tends to be much lower. Here's our cash.
Carol, if I can take you back
Yes.
just for a sec. In the longer term aging report, I noticed that at this roughly same point in time for the October billing, we were at 10.53 90 days and over. And now we're at, in a comparable situation, at 17.87. That's quite a significant increase.
When you look at the percentages, it also is based on the total dollars. So the total balance at the end of October was higher. So the 90-day and over would have been a smaller portion of that. But yes, we do have a significant amount that are in the 90 and over. In May, I believe, we'll be bringing to the board the bad debt write-offs that we anticipate for this year. I believe last year we wrote off about 9,000, and this year will be a similar amount. We do have several bankruptcies that when we get to the end of this year, we will have to write off those dollar amounts. And I know at least one of them is over $3,000 by itself. We also have a few customers that are apartment complexes that have fairly large balances and that are rolling over into that 90-day column, but they are attempting to get caught up with us. So, it's still sitting out there in the oldest column, but as they make payments, it pays the oldest items first.
It just seems like a very large jump. And I think we need to be cognizant that not only are our billed revenues down, but our collections are down.
Well, again, our total outstanding balance is less now than it was at the end of October. So if you look at the October amount on the larger report that you're looking at, that was $220,000, and now our total outstanding balance is $172,000.
Well, right, but we're in a much lower water consumption period.
That's correct, but the reason that 90 and over is, it is about 7,000 higher, and as I said, we've got some apartment complexes that have not been keeping up with their bills, but they are making periodic payments.
Yeah, but that shouldn't be affecting the percentage.
Well, that's
Relatively.
the percentage is based on
It's
the
picking
full
up,
dollars.
it's picking up the past stuff that we have not collected as well as current amounts not
And we will
collected.
definitely see that increase, unfortunately, as we write off the bad debts. And as I said, we've got several bankruptcies within the district, many of which have current open accounts. The way the bankruptcy rule works, when we get notification of bankruptcy, we have to close that account, stop any attempt at collecting, and open a new account.
I was just trying, all I was trying to say was, since we know we're having problems collecting, and we know our revenues are below anticipated, that we really need to be paying attention and tightening our belts.
Do we have to turn their water off during the bankruptcy?
Absolutely not, we're not allowed to.
Yeah, good deal. I mean, times are tough.
So here's our cash and investment position. We haven't listed our interest earnings, but the local government investment pool is paying 0.5%, so it's, our interest earnings are not what they used to be.
Carol, if I might add one thing, Commissioner Sterling, with respect to your comment on the bankruptcy, in an aggravated case, we could go into the bankruptcy court and ask for relief from the automatic stay that Ms. Bright was referencing. So I just wanted to make the board aware that there is that potential remedy available if it really got to be an aggravated situation and the bills kept mounting and mounting.
Yeah, but I think we were talking about some apartment buildings.
No, the bankruptcies are actually like restaurants and other businesses, but at least the big ones that stick in my mind. But what we do, when we get the notice of the bankruptcy, we do submit our information. So if there is a settlement down the road, we do have a potential to recoup some of that.
Yeah.
And even after we've written it off, we will still
And it,
accept payment on it.
it does reflect differently if you have someone in a business or a restaurant that continues to take ratepayers' water and not pay for it. One anticipates that they're continuing to receive income, that's how come they're keeping the building open.
Right.
Whereas if we have just a residence, I mean, we need to have mercy on them and,
And as I said, we close the account when we get the bankruptcy notice, we open a new account. And they continue to get billed for new service and they pay those bills.
I think it's a pretty minimal percentage, the write-off.
Of our, yes.
Of our,
it is.
okay, of our actual operating revenue
Absolutely.
coming in. It's very,
Absolutely.
like, what is it, 5% or?
Not even that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
okay.
I think it's less than 1%, but it's,
Okay.
yeah, we have a pretty good
It's-
overall
Yeah,
collection
but it's
rate
very minuscule in comparison to,
to our total revenue.
exactly.
So budget to actual, we are 50% of the way through the budget at this time. Our general fund revenue is at nearly 53%. Our water revenue is at 55%, but again, we've been through our heavier use times. Based on history, we would really like to be at 59% now instead of 55%, so we do have a water revenue shortfall projected at about $268,000 if we can maintain where we are going forward to the rest of the year. So as you all know, we are in the low consumption portion of the year.
Carol, I looked at 55.13, and of course, this is a month old, and I know we won't have had any significant billing in the interim. But when I look at expenses, and this of course doesn't include CIP or anything, of that magnitude, but, and again, it's represents the first 6 months. And most of those expenses are pretty well set, they're, pretty constant. And if we just double those, we'll end up at 90.7 in expenses at the end of the year. And considering we're in the low water use time, I'd be surprised if we ended up at more than maybe 80% max of revenue.
I think we'll be higher than 80% on water revenue. And our general fund expenditures are now at 45%, which I calculate as being under projection by nearly $360,000. And yes, we have many things that are very constant across the board. We also have things for example, this is taking our total expenditures, so our capital outlay tends to come in chunks, and there may be things that we don't get to this year, and that's certainly an area that we can look at. If we haven't started a project, we may want to wait.
Or maybe we won't want to.
And we also have certain things that are front-loaded to the beginning of the year. Our workers' comp insurance is one example that we pay that at the beginning of the year. So that boosts us up a little bit at the beginning, and then, so we're kind of at a peak, and then we level out for the rest of the year. So doubling it works for some things, but not for all things. And we are keeping an eye on those activities.
Normally, you would expect to be, well, somewhere around 45–50%, 6 months into it.
And we're at
Give or
45%
take.
on our general fund.
Yeah,
So
okay, and
we
that's
are
about where we
under
are.
50%, yeah.
So that's what I'm just saying, we're knowing that our heavy water use, high water spill period is past for this fiscal year. A 55% right now is the end of December, is, I mean, it's still indicating a shortfall.
Is about 4% less than what I would hope to be at for this time of year. If you look at the second bullet under water revenue, I do have historical data, and I look at how much water do we sell in the August billing, how much do we sell in the October billing, how much do we sell in December, and if I add those up from kind of an average from historical, we should be at 59, and we are at 55.
Well,
So-
last year, is that 59, would that hold true for last year? Because last year we ended up 2.3 million in the hole.
Yeah. Last year, we were at, and the 2.3 million, Commissioner Holloway, includes our depreciation expense. So we will be in the hole again because we have depreciation expense. But when you look at our net revenue of revenues minus expenditures, we were not 2 million in the hole. So if you look here, if you look at last year's water sales, we were at about 53%. And I will say that our budgeted revenue, water revenue for last year was a little bit higher than our budgeted revenue for this year. I've recognized the trend, and I'm trying to accommodate that,
Yeah.
and I maybe wasn't as aggressive as I should have been. But at this time last year, we were at 53%, and this year we're at 55%. So, we are kind of aware of what the water trends are, and we are also closely monitoring expenditures.
We've got a warm month this month too. I saw people doing yard
Yeah,
work.
maybe
So
not
I'm
people with their
hoping
water in
we
their
can-
hearts. So,
I'm confused, Mrs. Bright, excuse me for bringing it to attention, but you say you're closely monitoring expenses?
yes, that's correct.
Why are the ratepayers paying for you to attend an executive master's public administration college program?
Okay, that's not,
It's,
you know what?
$30,000.
You know what, Carol, if you want to address it, you can, but Commissioner Sterling, you're kind of out of line. I mean, we're going over the financial reports. So there's an.
That's not part of finances?
There's an opportunity for you to put something on the agenda,
I do have
and
those
you
thoughts.
just don't feel like you need to go through a process that's actually been adopted, not just by this agency, but by many public entities in the state and actually in the United States. But for some reason.
Why don't you let her answer?
Well, because I'm letting you know that there's a process in the future.
We're listening, Carol.
Tammy, may I say something? Commissioner Sterling, there are processes in place by which commissioners are supposed to address issues with employees and staff.
Exactly.
And
She's
that
a
is-
contractor.
and
She's a
just moment,
contract.
Just a moment, please.
She's contract, just the same as Mrs.
These are processes where
Oh,
if you
okay.
have a concern about employees or about staff, you do not address it in a public meeting. You take that to executive session. There's a particular place for this.
I stand corrected, Carol. You don't have to answer
You
the
discuss it with
question.
the general manager, you discuss it in executive session.
She does have certain
It's not
employees.
executive session.
She does have
Personnel
certain.
information is executive session.
Yes, yeah, it is. So you know, if I were you,
Only
I would
complaints and
be,
discipline.
Well, that's fine. I
No,
can
but
accept
you know what?
responsibility for my actions, you know?
okay.
I don't have any problem doing that.
Okay. Okay.
I would like to respond that the information in the newspaper was inaccurate. I will state that I am participating in the executive MPA program at Portland State. It does cost approximately $30,000, and I have not asked the ratepayers to pay that. I have asked for a little bit of assistance based on IRS rulings. There are limits of amounts that the IRS approves as non-taxable, and I have not submitted any reimbursements at this time. So don't believe everything you read.
Absolutely. That's simply how come I asked you. That's all that it is.
But you will be reimbursed up to some level.
I will ask for it, it depends on the budget, but we did include a specific dollar amount. It was a little over $5,000 in the last year's budget as part of the training budget. And I will say that I am learning amazing things that I think will be very beneficial to the district and the ratepayers.
An executive master's in public administration?
Yes.
Thank you, Carol.
That's usually the way
And there is a
CFOs.
provision that once she completes that for each year, that she works for the district, a certain percentage of the amount paid is forgiven. And if she leaves before that time, she has to pay it back.
So the ratepayer money is going into it?
Well, ratepayer money goes into all training, Commissioner Holman.
Well, I mean, she's a CFO, she's not a public administrator. You are.
I am
A
a public
CFO is a
administrator.
public administrator. See, what you're talking
But
about.
we're trying to save money.
This is like, I don't know, this just kind of
That's
reminds
Mr.
me
Moore's decision.
of just an ignorant McCarthyism court, but Carol, if you could proceed with your presentation, please.
So, as we're talking about being halfway through the year, I know that concern is where we are on our debt covenant. So here's kind of our mid-year debt covenant review. The highlighted line in the middle is the rate stabilization reserve fund. At this point, calculating exactly where we are with the actuals through December, we would need to use $76,000 from the rate stabilization fund to meet our debt covenants.
And we've already, at least on paper, used a chunk of it for last year. That's
correct.
an illusory transaction.
Well,
Well, you didn't actually move the money.
yes, we did.
We voted on it, we had to.
We moved the money in this fiscal year. We did move the money.
So you did a transfer from
The board
2012 fund to
voted on it.
2011 fund?
No.
No, we
It's
didn't
all,
vote for
it's
that.
into, yes, it was part of the budget.
We allocated money into
And
the
as the
stabilization.
budget was approved, it appropriated that transfer, and we did that transfer at the beginning of the year.
But you didn't transfer it into 11, it's
No.
still sitting in 12.
Yes, that's
what I
correct.
was saying.
That's correct.
Right. It's a
And
transfer in
one of the
spirit.
reasons we need the 76,000 was really not to meet the one-time, less the SDC funds. Our SDC revenues to date have been pretty small, although we are getting a lot of inquiries at this point about new services. So there is some potential, but I do believe that budget line will probably come in under budget as well. Again, a reminder to the board that we do have some openings on the budget committee. There's 3 openings. We did put a message on the December bill, and we will also put a message on the February bill. We also have included the notice on the CRW website. And again, ask the board, feel free to talk to your neighbors about this wonderful opportunity. We do have, one of the positions is a replacement position for Kelly Harris, who resigned last year. And so we would most likely fill that position for a 1-year term, and then the other 2 would be for full 3-year terms. If people have questions of you about what's one of the requirements, we anticipate having the proposed budget available for the board and the budget committee members, with a copy available for the public around April 1st. And we would plan on having our initial meeting sometime in that first week of April, and then we'll have additional meetings as needed.
Okay, so we'll need to approve that next month?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we did have Moss Adams attend the meeting last month, and we got so wrapped up in their presentation that the board did not officially acknowledge receipt of the audit, so I thought I would put that
I
in.
wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to